Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you are celebrating out there in the world. We're also looking forward to 2021, I think. It's been a heck of a year, 2020 has. So it's good to have a celebration.
Absolutely. And you can see we tried to get into the Christmas spirit a little bit with our virtual backgrounds here. Jackson's got his awesome Santa Claus hat on, so we are celebrating full swing here at the Digital Ag team.
Exactly. And even though I'm in Dothan, Alabama, where we have 60-degree weather right now, I get to have a little bit of white Christmas in my virtual background.
Yeah, you don't need to rub in the nice weather to the rest of us who still have snow on the ground, but glad you are made it safely home and get to celebrate with your family.
Absolutely. It's exciting. And I hope everybody is able to do some celebrating with their family this year. In spite of everything that's going on with COVID-19, I hope that people are being safe, but also are, taking the time. Family is a valuable resource for us. And I hope everybody is able to find some time for family during the holidays this year.
Absolutely. And also, if you find yourself traveling, we hope that you tune in to some of our previous episodes while you have some of that drive time.
Yep. They're great ways to fill your time and also make great use of it by learning about digital ag and some of the things that are either already here and that we need to make better use of, or some of the things that are on the horizon and may make an impact on agriculture here in 2021 and beyond.
And so speaking of digital ag, we're going to dive into our topic today. It's something a little bit unique, but when you think about Christmas and you think about Christmas trees, something you may not have thought of is where those trees came from or the technology that was needed to produce them.
100%. And Christmas tree production is actually something that a lot of universities, extension programs focus on. There are a lot of Christmas tree growers out there, a lot more than I realized. And they are starting to get into this digital ag approach. And kind of how we got to the idea of this episode is through finding an article online from North Carolina State Extension that was talking about UAVs and Christmas trees. And we'll post a link to that article in the show notes. But I thought it was a super interesting article. Didn't you, Sam?
I did too. It was, something we don't think about. Even though we use UAVs in our research, we don't necessarily think about how they're used other places. And, I say other places, but really there's actually 50 Christmas tree growers, at least in Nebraska too. So we may not be the top producing state of Christmas trees, but we do have some farmers here in Nebraska that are providing that for us.
Yeah, and you can find your Christmas tree producer there locally if you want to go and get a real Christmas tree this year and support some of your local farmers. There's actually a kind of a directory of those Nebraska Christmas tree growers that's offered, I believe, by the Nebraska Christmas Tree Growers Association online, and it's basically through nebraska.gov. So that's a good opportunity for you to find your local Christmas tree growers. And so beyond Nebraska, there's a lot of Christmas tree production in other areas of the United States. Oregon is the #1 Christmas tree producing state. North Carolina is #2. And overall, the industry is a $250 million industry in the United States.
Wow. It's a very high value crop. And what's interesting, or what we found, was actually that production has been down within the last few years. We actually found a statistic on it that's dropped more than 25% between 2002 and 2017. But there's also some good news that in 2020, when people were at home and were spending more time with in their houses, a lot more people actually went out and bought Christmas trees, real Christmas trees.
Yeah, and there's actually a New York Times article, kind of an interactive article that came out yesterday on the 17th of December from a Canadian Christmas tree farm. I believe it was in Ontario, but I'll have to double check that. But either way, they said that they're having their best year that they've ever seen right now. And I don't know if that's because more people are taking the time to really invest in Christmas trees this year with less, busyness with COVID and everything. But that's pretty exciting to see, I guess, for Christmas tree growers out there.
I would agree. Jackson, do you get a real Christmas tree?
So I do not. I think I would if I was actually going to be in my own apartment there in Lincoln for Christmas. But since I'm back here in Dothan, we have an artificial Christmas tree at my house. And quite honestly, my parents are just about done with it because it's one of the pre-lit Christmas trees that
Mm.
supposedly makes everything very easy. But when the lights go out and certain sections of the Christmas tree don't work, it can be a little bit frustrating because it's like, well, why didn't we just go ahead and get a regular Christmas tree and string our own lights, you know?
Right. So in a couple of years when you get a real one, then you'll realize though they can be a lot of work, but it's definitely it's nice to have your house smell like a real Christmas tree. It's worth it. Yeah,
Right.
so we get a real Christmas tree at my parents' house, but it's one just from our own farm. I have not been to a really nice Christmas tree farm before. It's very interesting to see some of these pictures.
Well, it's kind of nice to have kind of a resource there on your farm to be able to just go and get your own Christmas tree. Do you string your own lights?
Yeah. Yep.
Any special ornaments that you like to put on your Christmas tree?
Yeah, we our family gets an ornament every year from my grandparents, and then I also get an ornament from my parents every year. So I just have like this timeline of ornaments across a part of the tree that I get to call my own, and then my siblings all have ornaments on the trees as well. What about you?
That's, that's really cool. Yeah, we used to have an ornament tradition. My mom was a big well, so we were big Star Wars fans growing up, and then also my mom was a big Gone with the Wind
Mm.
fan. And so we used to get a Gone with the Wind ornament every time a new one came out, and so we have a bunch of those that go on the tree. Obviously, we have a ton of commemorative ornaments from when my brother and I were little, um, and there are plenty of Star Wars ornaments. So yeah, we have a ton of ornaments. We've gotten a lot worse at decorating the Christmas tree as the kids have gotten older. Um, Meaning me and my brother. So, we're not around to help decorate anymore, which can slow things down quite a bit.
Yeah, my because we just get a tree from our own farm. My dad sometimes threatens to not get one, and we've gone a couple of years without a tree. But we always, you make the most of it, and it's so fun to get all those decorations out and reminisce about those things. So, yeah,
Yeah,
hopefully your family, every family out there, is able to do those things more this year. Hopefully, have more time.
I hope so. And I think Christmas trees are one of those traditions, right? That have so many family ties to them. And really a lot of Christmas tree production is done by families that have had Christmas tree farming in their history for, decades and generations now. And so there are a lot of kind of smaller operations. Like when you think of the scale of row crop agriculture in Nebraska, for example, it's not uncommon to have a, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 acre farm. And when you think about Christmas tree production, it's really, you're really thinking a lot smaller scale. Like there are going to be some farms that are less than 100 acres out there that are, able to sustain themselves pretty well because it is such a high value crop.
Absolutely, yeah.
So small acreages, but there's a lot of investment, right? So with them being so high value, there is a lot of investment that goes into it up front. So when you think about how much you may have to invest on a 1 acre basis, Penn State kind of threw out this number, and I think this was from I think a 2012 article that Penn State had. It would take between $11,000 and $12,000 to pay for the seedlings to plant on 1 acre of Christmas tree production land, which is quite an upfront investment.
That is a huge upfront investment. And you would think about how a lot of people may think that you just plant it and forget about it, but that's really not the case. Something that we learned was, from that same article, they talked about how there can be, 6 to 7 spray applications a year. So that's inputs just like we have on our corn and soybean farms as well that you're thinking about. But now think about it in the long term, multiple years on the same plant.
Yeah, because it may be 7 to 12 years before you're really able to harvest that tree, right? It's got to get to the right height. It needs to be the right maturity to where the aesthetics of the tree are correct, because that's really what a lot of people are purchasing on, right? Is the aesthetics
Mhm.
of the tree, and so there's a ton that goes into it. And I want to go ahead and make this statement up front. Neither Sam or I are experts on Christmas tree production. We've simply been learning and have been fascinated, I think, with exactly what all goes into it. I mean, I was watching a video this morning of people shearing Christmas trees and exactly how that process is done, and it was super interesting. So
Yeah, and it's so hard for us to imagine, I think, 7 to 12 years, and if you plant a crop, uh, corn or soybeans or a row crop where, you plant it and it's a rough year, the conditions maybe weren't well, you move on to the next year. But then try to imagine that with a crop that you need year after year and how one bad year could have an influence on multiple years crop. It's just very hard to get your mind wrapped around that investment.
So trying to match, really the issue there, right, is trying to match the supply with the demand, right? Because if you don't have your Christmas trees one year because the ones that you had harvested somehow were, there was some mistake that was made in the production process, then all of a sudden you're going to have a lot of people that are unable to buy a Christmas tree from you, and maybe they're not going to return. Maybe they go to the different Christmas tree farm down the road that does have trees. So that's a huge impact. And also, how are you supposed to have an idea of what people are wanting to shop for 7 to 12 years out from when you're actually going to sell the product?
Right. I mean, we had no idea 7 years ago that we were going to have a pandemic in 2020 and that the demand for trees would be up. So, yeah, it's very hard to think about that demand.
And trying to match up that demand is just one of the challenges that Christmas tree farmers face. Another one is disease. And interestingly enough, so there are some other diseases out there. There are some needle related diseases that just kind of, lead to yellowing of leaves, which affect the aesthetics. But then there's an even more serious disease that we may be familiar with called Phytophthora root rot, right, Sam?
Absolutely. Yeah. You may see that out in your soybeans, but who would have thought it also affects trees?
Yeah, and it's really interesting. It's basically spread via spores, and it's really prevalent within depressions on these Christmas tree farms.
Yeah. So, any of you guys who have ever had Phytophthora, it's in cold and wet conditions that you see it a lot. And so, same thing with trees. And so,
Exactly.
how to manage for that is very interesting. If it were to wipe out all of your seedlings one year, you won't have trees 12 years from now.
Exactly. And it's especially challenging with Christmas tree production, right? Because Christmas trees are a type of tree that really does, or at least a lot of the varieties that are grown as Christmas trees are varieties that do not like to have wet feet, so to speak. They
Mhm.
really want drier soil. And so a lot of Christmas tree farms are built on slopes to help with some of that runoff. And they like really rocky terrain, right, Sam?
Yeah, our understanding is that they are often planted on slopes and, like you said, rocky terrain because they need to have the good drainage, but also their roots have to be able to get a lot deeper than maybe our corn plants
Yeah.
do. So yeah, they're often planted on slopes, which presents a lot of other challenges as well.
Yeah, and especially, I guess I'm thinking about drought, for example. So if you've got a slope, a lot of that water is going to want to run down to the bottom, whereas probably where you're going to have a lot of the issues with disease,
Mhm.
right? But at the
Or
same time, if it's dry, it's going to be a real challenge.
That's right. And we also think about how, well, the water interactions then affect nutrient interactions, or how that slope then, influences the movement of nutrients. And so that's something, that we can all relate to, but maybe didn't think about for your trees.
Exactly. And so a few other issues that Christmas tree producers run into that you may not think about in row crop production. One of them is rodents. So apparently rodents are a really big issue for trees. I guess they like to make their homes in trees. So that can be an issue. Theft and vandalism are actually two things that you have to apparently worry about in Christmas tree production, which I guess I was very surprised about.
I'd agree. I'm sure it comes with the territory of being a high value crop. You don't have to worry about someone coming into your cornfield and stealing a bunch of the ears of corn, but apparently, the high value crop it is a concern.
Yeah, and then one of the last ones that was kind of listed in the articles that we found about Christmas tree production is fire. And I know seeing in the news all the West Coast fires that we had this year, and even not just on the West Coast, but in Colorado and Western Nebraska,
Mhm.
even the fires were a really big deal. And with Oregon being the top Christmas tree producing state, they might have gotten really, really hit hard by those fires.
Maybe that's why demand is up in Canada. But
That's very true. Yeah, we may have to be shipping some down here across the border.
mhm.
Um, but this kind of brings us to the real topic we wanted to get to today. We're a digital ag podcast, and so North Carolina State and Michigan State are two universities that we've found in just our short reading for this episode that are starting to explore UAV usage in Christmas trees. And some of the areas that they're working on that in are inventory management, and crop height measurements are kind of the first two kind of steps in the direction of using UAVs in Christmas tree production that we've heard of.
And we tried to set the stage of the challenge of managing Christmas trees that, if they're grown on slopes, you can imagine walking and trying to scout, per se, these trees to see how their height is, or how many you have to sell this year. You could think about how if you could get a UAV out there to take a picture, that would help make that prediction for you, or that estimation for you, how that would save on your time and your labor, and your stress, I'm sure, as well. So
yeah, and depending on how your Christmas tree crop is planted, right, you may have very narrow rows, which means you have to have a much narrower wheelbase tractor in order to get around, using any equipment. So there's a lot of rollover risk there, especially if you're on a slope. And so there are a lot of safety concerns out there for folks too that UAVs may be able to help with.
And let's talk about this, how they're doing the inventory management. Am I correct that they are, they're taking multiple pictures, and, it doesn't do a great job of showing, it doesn't look like a Christmas tree per se. It looks kind of just like a little mound out there, or a haystack, or a
Yeah.
shrub. But using some models, they can actually then estimate the height of the tree, what the point of that tree is, to try to do those height estimations.
Yeah, exactly. And this requires some manual on the ground work of going out and getting those true heights, right? And then also building the algorithm on the back end that is able to identify, okay, we know that there's a point to this tree, but as you mentioned, it's a haystack error. So you've kind of just got this rounded off top that looks like a juniper shrub, and kind of have to tie those boots on the ground measurements to what the stitched images are reporting. And so North Carolina State is really trying to do a lot of work in that area right now. And from what I understand in conversations that we had with Jeff Owen there at North Carolina State Extension heading into this episode, they're starting to make some headway, and they're able to, get pretty close on these crop height measurements, and even get, good counts of Christmas trees that are ready to harvest.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's really interesting. You'd think it'd be something fairly simple, but it's really a complex thing, and it's cool to hear that the universities are doing research on it.
Yeah, and from what I understand, the UAVs are not the simplest to fly on these really slopey terrains, right? Because we know from flying a fixed wing drone that there can be warnings at times, even when the drone is nowhere close to the ground, about ground proximity warnings. And so actually planning flights to be prepared for the slopes that are going to change quite frequently on Christmas tree farms is apparently a challenge within UAV use and Christmas tree production.
Yeah, and we have enough challenges how it is in Nebraska, keeping our drone out of trees, lines, and out of other obstacles. So I can't imagine flying a drone around all these trees. And I'm sure they have to fly fairly low too. So yeah, they have a lot harder of a time than we do, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, and it can be very useful. I guess a few other uses that that Jeff was telling me about when I talked to him was that they're looking at using UAVs for disease detection. So actually being able to figure out which trees are infected with, for example, needle cast disease or phytophthora root rot, and being able to track how that spreads on a farm and potentially even how to manage that.
Absolutely. And then it also sounds like they're using it for some site-specific pest management, or maybe that's more coming in the future. Maybe it's just being explored right now, but that would be really exciting as well as nutrient management. So that's how we use it in our research. But it's cool to see it in other crops as well, especially Christmas trees. And then it could be used for other things as well, kind of like a scouting tool, right?
Exactly. Just kind of identifying some different site selection aspects, maybe going in and figuring out where you want to harvest trees first, just kind of tying back to that disease element, right? If you have disease that you can see spreading in a particular area of your farm, there are probably some trees that are right there near it that maybe haven't been infected yet that you want to go ahead and harvest while they're still of value. And so that's one other way that I think these drones can be used. It's super cool to me to think about a drone flying through, a Christmas tree farm, and really being able to get right up onto a tree and say if only one tree really needs this fungicide treatment or this pesticide treatment, especially in the environmental context that we're in now, where we have organics being such a popular thing. Being able to go in and just spray one Christmas tree instead of doing a blanket application on the whole farm is kind of a really cool opportunity, I think.
Absolutely. Both from a marketing aspect, but also saving, the bottom line of the farmer too. If they don't have to spend as much on a herbicide because it's only, or a pesticide because it's only affecting a handful of trees and they know where those trees are, how much money that could be saving as well.
Yeah, and on top of just only doing it on one tree, also making it more efficacious, right, for that
Mm-hmm.
particular tree. Because one of the issues, according to Jeff, that they currently have, right, is when they're making their pesticide applications right now, they're relying on a lot of drift, and for things that are sprayed a while or quite a distance away from the rest of the farm to get to those trees, but you really don't get great penetration into the tree canopy with those products. But with a drone, you can get close enough to the tree, and hopefully with enough spraying power that you should be able to get deep into that canopy and really take care of the problem, which ultimately is going to get you better bang for your buck with that product.
Absolutely. So yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity to use digital technology in this, specialty crop, and it's very
There,
interesting. Hopefully, we can see some of that being applied to us as well.
yeah, and I think really a problem that we have out here in Nebraska that may have some, there may be an impact area for some of these technologies for us is with Eastern Red Cedar management, right, Sam?
Absolutely. So some of you listeners probably even know better than I do about the problem that we have with Eastern Red Cedars. And, it's something that started, decades ago when we were planting it for windbreaks. And then it just became such an invasive tree and really just took over. And so now it's hurting rangeland, it's hurting livestock production just because it's hurting the grazing quality or the grassland quality. And so we got to start thinking about creative ways to start managing this.
And one of the biggest things I would imagine is figuring out where your biggest problems are, right? So figuring out where the greatest density of trees are. And so some of that inventory management aspect, and even identifying a red cedar from a different type of tree, potentially if it's near another tree line that may be expanding into land that you don't want it to get to. I think those are some really, really big aspects of this to try to target some of that management for Eastern Red Cedars.
Absolutely. You have to know how big the problem is before you can really start to treat it. And, maybe it's also just prioritizing, right? So if you think about some of the management is with burning or some of it's out manually cutting it down, you really have to target the worst areas first. And so knowing where that is using UAVs could be really beneficial, as well as, the future technology of can we treat them with UAVs? Can we
Right.
start fires? Can we do spray applications with UAVs? I think that's down the road, but very
Yep.
interesting to think about. And
And
maybe
even,
we,
yeah,
oh,
even tracking like how good of a job we did with those management practices, seeing if 2 years down the road, any of those trees are still hanging around, or if any new trees have sprung up in that same area, and being able to figure out, okay, did this management practice actually work for me in this application?
mm-hmm. And hopefully these are all things that we can learn from the Christmas tree industry. So
Exactly.
that'd be really cool to see.
And if you do want to learn a little bit more about Eastern Red Cedar management, we do have some experts at UNL, one of whom is Direct Twidwell over in the agronomy and horticulture department. Dr. Direct Twidwell would be a great resource, and I'm sure that he would appreciate anybody reaching out who wants to learn more about Eastern Red Cedar production, or not production, but
Management.
management.
Yeah.
Thinking about Christmas tree production over here. Sorry. Um, So I guess, with that said, we'll go ahead and start wrapping up here because it's Christmas, and I think we all want to go enjoy a little bit more Christmas. But I think it's been really fun to talk about Christmas trees and learn a little bit more about what all goes into Christmas tree production.
That's all right. So next time when you look at your Christmas tree, you'll probably be thinking about some of the fun facts, hopefully, that we shared with you. And yeah, you may not look at your artificial or a real tree the same again.
Yeah, I know for me, there's a ton more that goes into Christmas tree production than I really thought. And I know that not everybody out there is that's a Christmas tree grower is using these digital technologies right now, but even all the manual labor that goes into making sure that these trees stay healthy and aesthetically pleasing for 7 to 12 years is really impressive. And I do want to support that industry, and so I'm definitely going to be looking more to getting a real Christmas tree here in the future.
Just learning about any type of crop that is grown so differently than the typical crops in Nebraska is very cool to see. And you think about their lifestyles of that huge investment. It's very interesting.
At the end of the day, no matter how different our production scenarios are, like, we're all kind of in the agriculture industry together. And I think that's something that's so cool to see, because everybody has their own challenges to deal with, and everybody loves doing it, just as much as the next person. Everybody loves what they're doing, it seems like. And
we hope that digital ag can help.
Absolutely. So with that is the conclusion of this FarmBits episode. We hope that you'll join us next week. We're going to dive into some of what happened in 2020 and kind of provide a review of how that impacted digital ag in 2020, and maybe even talk a little bit about where we're going in 2021.
Absolutely. So we hope you join us next week, and we hope you have a safe and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
See you next time.
Thank you for taking the time to join us today on the FarmBits podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts to be informed about the latest content each week.
We welcome your feedback, so if you have comments or questions for us, please reach out to us over email, on Twitter, or in the review section of your favorite podcast platform. Our contact information can also be found in the show notes.
We would like to thank Nebraska Extension for their support of this podcast and their commitment to providing high-quality informational material to members of the agricultural community in Nebraska and beyond.
The opinions expressed by the hosts and guests on this podcast are solely their own and do not reflect the views of Nebraska Extension or the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
We look forward to you joining us next week for another episode of FarmBits.